Welcome. I'm so happy you're here, Miss Jackie.
I am too. I was so tickled. I didn't have to call her. I'm gonna put her on speed dial. So because it's like every other Wednesday, we're working till 6:30.
Uh,
And they do it on purpose, I think. Because I said, golly, look at this. We're getting off at 4.
I think so too.
Oh,
is it on here?
Is it on?
no, I like to come here. I like to, Corey will read it to us.
I'll read what?
The scripture. Where are we anyway?
Okay, so we are in John.
John what?
8.
John chapter 8.
8? Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on.
You said
Mhm.
38, right? 38?
I'm sorry?
38?
38.
John chapter 8. Which verse?
38.
38. Okay.
Chapter 8. Nope, not 38. 37.
37. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't
37.
have on my right glasses. Okay, this one. I couldn't see.
So when we're done, we're going to pray for all the people who are sick.
Y'all got enough room over there,
Yes.
sweet man? Okay.
Yes, Miss Pat. We will.
There's lots of people sick.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it turned down yet?
It is, yep.
This Mr. Golden.
We're live.
Oh, okay.
So welcome everybody that's on. Thank you for joining us. Are we ready? Make sure it's working. Okay. All right. So John chapter 8, verse 37. The title of it is Abraham's seed and Satan's. Before we go into 37, we're just going to jump 4 verses back, because I want to give you guys, make sure we have kind of recap, as this is where it starts going into them discussing Abraham and where the next verses are. So the verses right before that, verse 37, Jesus is telling the Jews that essentially, this is where he says the truth will set you free, right?
Mhm.
They are still thinking in the manner of physicality, not spiritually, right? So they're thinking, well, we don't understand what you're saying because we're already free. We're not in bondage, right? That's where they answered, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free? Jesus answered them, most assuredly, I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. As he's speaking to them, there's many times in the Bible that it talks about how people that don't have God in them are not going to understand the words
Right.
that are coming out, right? It's a mystery. And that's part of the kind of the incredible journey when you accept God in. He starts showing you these mysteries and the things that you read. You can read the same verse over and over and get new meaning from it, right? Because God is actually the one speaking it into you. So at this moment where they're not understanding him, we can say that there's definitely a lack of God inside, right? Because if they had it, they would begin to understand where he was speaking. And that's where we're going. That's where we're starting with this, is they start listing Abraham and themselves as Abraham's descendant, meaning that because they're Abraham's descendant, they somehow have an entitlement to being, somehow have an entitlement, right? That they're better than somebody else, right? Being Abraham's descendants essentially meant that you were saying that God was with you, right? Because Abraham, big thing with Abraham was he was a friend of God, right? And being a friend of God was a big deal, right? So when they're saying they're descendants of Abraham, they're using that as a title, right? This is a title, an entitlement that they're trying to take. Okay, verse 37. That's where we're starting. So Abraham's seed and Satan's, and obviously Jesus recognizes what they're doing and puts a stop to it very, very quickly. Okay, it says, "I know that you are Abraham's descendants, but you seek to kill me, because my word has no place in you." This is where I'm talking. Without God, the word is not going to find its place. It's not going to find meaning for those that are hearing it. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have seen with your father. All right. So Jesus is saying, I've seen what I'm speaking about what I've seen with my father, and you're speaking about what you've seen with your father. What father do you think Jesus is talking about?
His father is God, and their father is their father.
Okay. That would be a physical, but Jesus was not speaking physically, right?
Abraham, since of the family of Abraham.
Well, he's speaking spiritually, right? If God is the father, if Jesus is saying God is his father, and they are seeking to kill him, right? Let's keep reading. Let's see what he means here. They answered and said to him, "Abraham is our father." Okay? Now, obviously, Abraham is not their father in a physical sense, right? Because Abraham was many, many years before them, right? But they're saying that they are from the lineage, the holy lineage of Abraham, right? But Jesus is speaking spiritually. They're speaking physically. Jesus is speaking spiritually. Your spiritual father, right? And it says it very, very directive. Jesus said to them, "If you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. You do the deeds of your father." Okay. Who do you think the father is?
The devil.
I'm sorry?
The devil.
The devil?
Since he's not a God, they're influenced by evil.
Right. It's a one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and let's keep going. Jesus said to them, you do the deeds of your father. They said to him, "We were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God." So their position is based on a
Lineage.
pride, right? An entitlement, right? Just because, their thought process is not built on their actions, but they're actions of somebody else, right? And by entitlement, they can just, oh, well, I'm godly like Abraham, right? Jesus said to him, if God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God, nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you're not able to listen to my word. You are of your father, the devil,
Yes, I was right.
and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Which of you convicts me of sin? And if I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of God hears God's words. Therefore you do not hear, because you are not of God. This is very, very specific. And we can walk away with this in a manner that what's interesting is we have to understand that when God is not part of somebody's life, what you're speaking to them is not resonating, right? It doesn't make sense. And as Jesus is saying here, if God is not in you, you're not going to understand. You're not going to be able to grasp what it is. Those mysteries aren't going to be given until you take that step of faith, right? Faith first, right? But I want to go deeper into this with the Abraham and where he's speaking about how he's relating the fact that they want to kill him to being your father's the devil, right? And as he says, you're the father of the devil, you and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning. So he was a murderer from the beginning. Where is he speaking about this? Where is he going with this? Anyway.
Well, the first murderer was Adam's two sons.
Cain and Abel, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be the first physical murder,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It would be the eating of the apple.
That would be the spiritual murder, right? So there's two different murders, right? From the beginning, the spiritual murder, we can call it, right? Between Adam and Eve and eating of the apple, and then the physical murder of Cain, of Abel. Now, this is where this is very interesting why Jesus uses this the way that he does when they bring up Abraham. Okay, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we're gonna jump just so we have a better understanding of where Jesus's head was at. Right, there's a chapter in Genesis that people tend to just blow through because it just seems like it's this genealogy type chapter where it's just going through names and how long they were alive,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
It starts in Genesis 5 that says this is the book of generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God, male and female, he created them, right? And he blessed them and named them man. And when they were created, when Adam lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. Now, this sounds like a brand new, this sounds like these are the first kids, right? But we've already gone through the story of Cain and Abel. chapter 4 is the story of Cain and Abel, right? Gosh, I hate ads, by the way. They make me so angry. Commercials and ads. Come on. Okay, chapter 4. It goes through Cain and Abel, okay, and goes through their through their death, okay. But prior to it going through the murder, it goes through the lineage of Cain, okay, and where he settled. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. I'm just going to throw out some of these names because I want us to understand how this parallels. Okay, Cain, and this is after Cain already killed Abel, was banished. Right, he conceived and bore Enoch. He called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael, and Mehujael fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Lamech. And Lamech took two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. Ada bore Jabal, and was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. Okay. So we got the names that was lineage of Cain, right? We jump over to chapter 5, and we find that after Seth, thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Enosh fathered Kenan. Kenan fathered Mahulah, just like the other one, right? He fathered Jared. Jared then fathered Enoch. We have two lineages with the same names. There are two Enochs. There's two Methuselahs. There's two Lamechs, because Enoch fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Lamech. These are two very different lineages, right? One is a lineage that God has blessed. One is a lineage that came from Cain, which is, he's speaking of, obviously, the devil and that lineage, right? Abraham came from the lineage of Seth, okay? Through those names. So it's very easy for them to also say that they came from one lineage or another, right? They're all the same names. These are two different chapters in Genesis that have the same names, but from one from darkness, one from light, right? And it's very easy to get confused in these, especially because all of these people lived like 900 years. 7 to 900 years, right? Old.
Crazy.
Old. So when Jesus is talking about this with Abraham, he's getting deep with them, right? He's making sure that they understand that not only he's calling them out on their entitlement, which is simply pride, but he's also making sure they understand, hey, listen, I know the genealogy, and you guys should know it as well. But just because you're from one genealogy does not mean you are a friend of God, right? And that's where it's really becoming specific. You're not a friend of God unless you're a friend of God, right? And your father being a friend of God doesn't mean you are a friend of God. Does that make sense? And I say friend of God because that's what God called Abraham, right? Called him a friend of God. Okay, let's keep going. Before Abraham was, I am. That's the title going into chapter 48. Then the Jews answered and said to him, do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? Jesus answered, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father. Can we see where this, so interesting, why they would go right there after Jesus has just told them that their father is Satan, right? And very convincingly said, basically, the reason I can say this is because you're trying to kill me for no reason. If you had God in you would love, right? Because that's what happens when you have God, is you pour out love, not hatred, right? But they go right back. Do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? So number one, here's the entitlement thing, right? Remember, we're descendants of Abraham. You're a Samaritan, right? So they're already placing a classification on status, physical status with him. Touching on the spiritual side, it's basically it reminds me of like two kids fighting, right? And they're basically just, I know you are, but what am I? Like, it's like this, they're going back and forth. No, you have a demon. No, you have a demon. But Jesus answered, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. And I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks and judges. Most assuredly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never see death. So here it is. Here he is touching on the pride, right? He's not saying this about him. He's implying, hey, you're here for your own glory, right? By saying what they're saying, the descendants of Abraham, and creating some type of class, social status. That's where their head is at. As well as saying, hey, God is the only one that judges, as you guys are standing here judging, right? So he's making sure that they're put in their place in a manner that is, that gives them a better perspective of the situation, right? Verse 52, then the Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and you say, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who is dead? And the prophets are dead. Who do you make yourself out to be? These dummies, right? The whole time Jesus is speaking spiritually, and they can't grasp the spiritual concept, and saying that, my word, anyone that keeps my word shall not die. He's not speaking of physical death. He's speaking spiritual, right? Everybody dies. Not everybody, but everybody, right?
Right.
Everybody gets old and dies out, right? But the spirit, where that spirit goes, and they're still thinking, still trying to make a stance and create this idea where Jesus is also putting himself in a status, right? See, that's what happens a lot of times. If you've ever experienced somebody who has their own insecurities, their own fears, their own sins, especially if somebody is in a certain type of sin, for some reason it's a very sensitive subject. Like they're almost fearful of getting caught, so they're over triggered. And they'll project that on other people, right? And that's really what is happening, happening here. They're trying to project something onto onto Jesus by trying to get him to step into pride, right? Remember what happened with Satan and Jesus when the spiritual temptations, right? What was Satan constantly trying to get Jesus to do, right? When he was up on the mountain, he was trying to get him to put himself in a prideful, right? Fall into pride. And that's what they're doing right here. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who is dead, and the prophets are dead? Who do you make yourself out to be? They're trying to get him to say he's entitled, he's bigger than them, and fall into that. And it's just another temptation, right? Remember the spirit of these people, where the spirit of these people is coming from, right? The spirit is coming from Satan. It's a dark spirit that is trying to get Jesus to fall into temptation, right? Fall into sin of some sort. In this case, it's pride. Jesus answered, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father who honors me, of whom you say that he is your God. Yet you have not known him, but I know him. And if I say I do not know him, I shall be a liar like you. But I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Okay, here again. The father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. What is he speaking about? How would Abraham see his day? This is a spiritual seeing of Jesus, right? So obviously, he's also indicating that the ones in heaven are fully aware of what's going on. Does that make sense? Because Abraham is in heaven, right? His spirit is with God. So if you ever question whether they know what's going on, what God is doing, right? It's obvious. They do. It's interesting to me because there is a, as we know in Job, where it speaks about the heavenly hosts, the sons of God, the celestial beings rejoicing when God created the earth, right? We can see how there is a knowledge of what's going on, right? God obviously has made it known to those that sit with him in heaven what is taking place. There's multiple areas where it speaks about this. Let's keep going. Verse 57. Then the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Right? Again, how can you think in a spiritual sense if you don't have a relationship with the creator of the spiritual realm? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How can you wrap your head around spiritual, the spiritual realm in truth, right? You can be certainly go down roads of spirit, darkness, right? But there's no way for you to know spiritual truth unless you actually have them in your heart, right? But they're still going down this road of physicality, and it's interesting if the amount of we talked about when Jesus is using parables, why he used parables. He had to create something to make sure for people to understand comparison of physical to spiritual, right? If somebody doesn't have spiritual in them, they're not going to understand when you speak spiritually. So you have to speak physically to where they understand and then connect the dots. Typically, it's God connecting the dots, right? Just as Jesus did. Remember, we have to remember that when Jesus spoke, it's like reading the Bible, right? Why is it so important to read the Bible every single day? Is because that's where God is speaking to you, right? If you're not reading, then you're not, and you're like, man, I keep praying, but God's not answering my prayers. Read. That's where he's speaking to. And it might not, the verse might not even be something that has anything to do with what you're praying about, but guess what? That's how God works, right? He'll make you aware of something, and it may not even be on subject. Okay, verse 58. Jesus said to them, most assuredly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am.
Oh, that really must have upset them.
Lit them up. How often does God say, I am?
Well, many, many times.
I am. Yeah, I am. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when he is saying this, what is Jesus actually saying?
I'm God.
I'm God. I'm God. Right? When he says this, because he's also, how many times in the Old Testament does it say, I am? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's throughout the Old Testament. So with him saying this and them having, you can have knowledge, book knowledge, right? But not have wisdom. Two very, very different things. Yeah. So they had knowledge of the Old Testament, the Mosaic Law, right? These are Pharisees. They were, they knew what it said. They didn't know what it meant, right? The meaning was lost. But they knew exactly what he said here. Remember, they didn't really understand anything else he was saying until he said this. Because remember, he's speaking to their spirit. He's not speaking to them as people. He's speaking to their spirit. And it ticked them off.
Mm-hmm.
It ticked that spirit off because immediately, verse 59, they took up stones to throw at him. Right? So we have to understand, he is not speaking to people. He is speaking to a spirit. Right? He's speaking to a dark spirit. That when he said this, he basically said, I'm done. You know who I am. I am. We're done. Right? And it ticked him off. And what did Cain do? How did he kill Abel? With a stone. What did he say what did he call them? Their father was Satan and the first murderer, right? And here they do the exact same thing. They pick up stones but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple.
They picked up stones in the temple?
Yeah. Yeah. Going through the midst of them and so passed by. It's such an interesting chapter. It's so incredibly interesting, and to recognize also that when we're speaking to people, we need to stop ourselves from looking at them in the manner of physical, right? We need to realize, we need to ask ourselves, who am I speaking to, right? Who is speaking to me? Yes, it's a person that's got experiences and history and traumas and all of these things, but we need to recognize, who is the spirit speaking to me, right? Because if the spirit that's speaking to you is not a spirit that is a godly spirit, we have to recognize the arena that we're in, right? We can also see that when somebody has a divided spirit, a conflicting spirit, it is very, very difficult to meet in the middle, right?
Common ground.
It's very difficult to negotiate with them in a manner that is going to be, a win-win for both parties, right? Mutually beneficial, right? It's also very difficult to find yourself in a place where apologies or forgiveness from you is going to mean anything to them. Does that make sense? If you're speaking to a spirit that this spirit is just not right, saying you're sorry is not going to carry the weight that it would for you, right? It's different when you are in Christ. Forgiveness is different, right, than to somebody who's not. Does that make sense? So we can see that it's important if Jesus is created as this whole chapter is based on him speaking to a spirit, but that spirit being in people. And we need to recognize that as well. We need to ask ourselves and be careful that we don't get triggered into a brawl when that is the only purpose of what the other is doing, right? Doesn't matter what it is, what it's about, right? They just want the fight, right? Because as long as they get the fight, they're getting you away from your spirit, right? As long as they can pull you away from God and for you to act a fool, they've won, right? So you got to recognize the spirit that's trying to trigger you. Recognize who's attacking you. It's not a person, right? Remember, it's a spiritual battle, not a physical one. Okay. Chapter 9. We're in chapter 9.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? No?
It's pretty deep.
It's deep,
Mm.
deep.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it is. When we read these things, it's so amazing to me that what's amazing to me is how many times I've passed by it without recognizing the depth of what Jesus is doing with these Pharisees. Like the conversation. At first look, it's just a conversation. It's just like this. Like I said, it's like two little schoolgirls fighting. Like, but it's the depth of it. You have to understand who he's fighting against. He's not fighting against people. It's not people. Yeah. Okay. Chapter 9. A man born blind receives sight. Now, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? All right. Let's talk about that for a moment. This actually is something we've discussed in pretty good detail in the angelology class, because the Old Testament talks about they believed in two things. Number one, if you had an ailment, you were sick, or you're blind or deaf or mute, you had a demon. This was their first inclination, right? You were possessed with something, right? Second was exactly what they just said. Wait, who sinned?
Yeah.
Who sinned? What? You're sick because somebody sinned, right? And if it wasn't you, then it was your parents. Now, why do you think they believe this? Where do you think this comes from?
Generational curses.
Well, generational curses. That's one. But remember, these are all well versed in the Old Testament people, right? These are his disciples asking this. No? So this isn't even the Pharisees. This is the disciples that are presuming that, hey, this guy was blind. It was obviously, and it's very important we understand this, when he said he was blind from birth, that means he didn't get something thrown in his eyes that made him blind. He wasn't born with the ability to see, and then, it was like a degenerational disease that caused him to go blind. No, this guy was born blind, right, from birth. So that had to have meant somebody sinned, right? Now, what's interesting is how could this man have been the one that sinned if he was born blind,
Yeah, really.
Right,
right?
Hmm.
right.
But this is not a question that was testing Jesus. This was a question of curiosity of how is this, right?
Well, they're saying that it's a curse. There's a curse there somewhere.
Somebody sinned. If you read the Old Testament, we understand that every chapter, I'm sorry, not every chapter, every book, the prophetic books where you have prophets, right? What were the prophets? What were they doing? Starting at Judges, on down the line. It was basically a cause and effect. God was coming to the Israelites going, hey, stop doing what you're doing. And if you don't stop, this is what's going to happen, right? Cause and effect. So if you read the Old Testament in a manner, it very much appears that there is some type of cause and effect from a sinful nature, right? And it wasn't just, think about it, the ones that they didn't get to the promised land. How many generations was it before they got to the promised land, right?
40 years, probably one generation.
So we're talking about the kids being affected from the parents' errors. So you can see why they're asking this, why they believe that, hey, wait a minute, they're not speaking about, something like smoking. They're speaking about there must have been something that they did that God placed this on them, right?
Cursed.
A wrath, right?
Mhm.
That there's a wrath of some sort, right? So it's a very important question that we ask because it also gives us an answer when people ask us, why would God do that, right? Why would God make this? Why would he allow this to take place, right? Like saying that God did this, right? So this gives us a kind of a good direction on that. Verse 3, Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. So number one, he crushed the idea that sin causes these things to happen, right? Now, granted, listen, if you smoke for 20 years, 40 years, whatever, you probably get a pretty good chance you're going to get lung cancer, right? That's a cause and effect, right? That's not taking care of yourself is going to cause health problems. This is not what he's speaking about, right? He's saying he is talking about a carnal sin that was so bad that they felt they were going to get punished, right? Generationally, like you said, generational curse of some sort, right? Verse 4, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Excuse me. So we now understand that the parents didn't sin, he didn't sin. That wasn't what caused it. But what's interesting here is the idea here that the works of God should be revealed in him. Remember when we're not to the book yet, but we've all heard the story of Paul talking about the thorn. Bless you.
Thank
you. The thorn that he had, and begging God to take away the thorn, right? This thorn that was causing this, and he even said, "This is a messenger of Satan." This thorn, right?
It wasn't one of humility.
I'm sorry.
Was it one of humility? To humble him?
One more time. I'm sorry.
Humility, humble him, humble
Okay.
him.
Yeah, well, he said, I'm not removing it. God told him, I'm not removing it for the sake of, to keep you humble.
I was right.
That this thorn, this sickness, whatever it was, Paul never says what that thorn was, right? And I think it's important for us to understand why he never said what the thorn was. It's because we would start looking at that being the only thorn. But everybody has a thorn. Do you not? Do we all have something that just you wish it wasn't there constantly? Because if it wasn't there, then you wouldn't, and it's a conviction, right? You keep, God, take this away. But we realize that when we're doing that, we're actually talking to God. And if he took it away, would we talk to God the same amount? Probably not, right? So we can see why something of a sickness or something that we have a thorn would drive us to God more. And there's another verse in John, we're not there yet, but in John 11, Jesus reiterates this when he says, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it, right? So we understand that when we get sick, it's not a punishment. We're not being punished. We have a choice to what people are going to see, right?
Because if there was nobody sick or having a problem, then Jesus had no one to touch.
Yes. I think in this particular case, how many people have read the story about this blind man?
About what?
About this blind man? Well, it's in one of the Gospels, so I'm sure many millions and millions and millions of times, right? And each time it brought glory to God, right? Even if that was the reason that he was born blind, was for him to be listed in the Gospels and be heard, and somebody come to Christ because of it, that's enough, right?
For someone to believe that God can heal them too.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, when he's speaking about night is coming, he's not speaking about this in a physical manner. He's, again, spiritually speaking. Verse 6, when he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva. And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, go wash in the pool, a Siloam, which is, Siloam. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Therefore, the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, is not this he who sat and begged? Some said, this is he. Others said, he is like him. He said, I am he. Therefore, they said to him, how were your eyes opened? He answered and said, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and I received sight. Then they said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
It says here in 9, it says, the Hebrew name for the pool of Siloam, located near the Temple Mount at the end of Hazarek Temple Tunnel. It was a source of water that was used with the ashes of the red heifer for purification. This pool was discovered early in the 21st century.
Very interesting. Why do you think Jesus did it the way he did? I mean, he could have just touched, he could have just said, you can see, right? He didn't have to go through the process of spitting on the ground and making clay. And what do you think that represented? Why do you think he did that?
Well, he had to be active in the thing by actually going to the pool to do what the Lord told him to do. So he had an activity in the learning process of who God was. If you didn't believe, you wouldn't have gone.
Right. But there's something hidden in here that's very that's interesting.
I mean, the spit
Well,
coming from God himself.
yeah, but still, you could have just spoken to it. You could have just said, "You can see," right? No, he didn't even. It's Jesus. He can do whatever he wants, right? But the process that he did was he made this guy go to the right.
That's what I said.
Made him go there, but he didn't see him again. You understand? He when he came back, right? So he went and washed and came back seeing. Right? Therefore, the neighbors and those who previously, number one, the guy's not going to know who Jesus is. He couldn't see him before.
That's right.
He could have been standing right in front of him. He had no idea. Right? Number one. But two, as we can see, when he came back, there were other people that had saw him and were like, wait, ooh, and you've been sitting here begging your whole life, and now you're walking around. Aren't you going to start questioning? Wait, could you have seen the whole time?
Yeah, you're faking it.
Have you been faking them? Man, you're a pretty good actor. But when he comes back, Jesus is not there. He is not there. He's gone. And how do we know that? Then they asked him, where is he? He said, I don't know. No idea. So the process of him doing the clay on his eyes and sending him away was important, because when that guy comes back, he's going to be interrogated, right? But there's no pride involved, right? Jesus is not there when he comes back. Yeah. And it's important as they start grilling him, right? The Pharisees excommunicate the healed man. What does excommunicate mean?
Kick them out.
Yeah. Shut him down, right? Excommunicate in the Urban Dictionary, next to excommunicate, you'd find ghost. They're ghosting him, right? Or what's the other word? Canceling him. What's another one, right? So they brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes.
Uh-oh.
Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put clay on my eyes and I washed and I see. Real simple, right? Therefore, some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. Here it is, the Mosaic law again coming into play, right? What is the Mosaic law? 10 Commandments, right? Keeping the Sabbath holy. And they're basing it on laws that are, and we're going to see how Jesus reacts to that. Okay. Others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. They said to the blind man again, what do you say about him because he opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. Now here again, the guy doesn't have any idea, right? He's just sitting there, and Jesus puts stuff on his eyes and says, hey, go wash it off, right? And then it's not there when he comes back. So this guy has no, like, all of a sudden he can see for the first time ever, right? But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? Number one, these parents let their kid who's blind begging in the streets. Number one, they obviously are not very far from here because it's not like they have a telephone to call them. It's not like, hey, send those parents a text. No. Like, this is your son. They had to come down there and see him and be like, hey, son, yeah, sorry, been around
Right.
for you much. But they confirmed that it is his son, right? His parents answered them and said, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age. Ask him. He will speak for himself. His parents said those things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, he is of age, ask him. Okay? Being put out of the synagogue is a big deal. By the way, it's still a big deal. The Jewish Community Center is a big deal. A while back, I became an honorary member of a Jewish Community Center. And I had a very good friend that was Jewish. He was under the belief as a Jew that when you die, you're dead, right? There's nothing comes. Like, this is everything. When you die, you're dead, right? But we had a good relationship, and I always joked around. We always joked, the religion was kind of a joke. And one day he gave me a card that was this community center, this honorary membership, and I didn't realize how important it is for that group, right? And so if you get kicked out of that, it's a major event. Like, it's an issue, right? So we can see that why they would have fear being kicked out of the synagogue, right? It's complete shame for your family. You lose everybody. I mean, we're talking about an entire Jewish community, right? So you lose all of those relationships. So it's a big deal, okay? And obviously, as they're saying this, the leaders at the synagogue have already put out that anybody that says Jesus is Christ, then that it's going to be a problem, right? So they again called the man who was blind, and he said to them, give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. Speaking about the blind man, right? This man, the blind man, is a sinner. You see what happened. They went back to the fact that he was blind because he was a sinner, right? He sinned. He sinned, the parents sinned, somebody sinned, and now he's blind. He answered and said, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Then they said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? So we can obviously see that Jesus knew that they were going to ask how his eyes were opened, right? And it was important enough for him to do it the way that he did, and not just, say you're healed. He answered them, verse 27, he answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, you are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from. Okay. Here it is again. Remember, what was it before? When we were reading the chapter before this, we're Abraham's descendants, followers of Abraham, right? Now it's, nope, we are Moses' disciples. They keep going back to something that was years and years and years and years before, right? And here's the thing is they know that God spoke to Moses based on what was written, right? The man answered and said to them, why this is a marvelous thing that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, you were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us? And they cast him out. So here we go again. There is a significant class that they keep going back to. There's a status, you're a sinner, we're not, right? One of the biggest lies that people can tell themselves and they can act is that they're not a sinner, right? When you didn't know God, that is how you acted, right? Have you ever met somebody that just doesn't believe that they've ever done anything wrong? Right? I was like that. Like, epically like that. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Miss Jack, you would not have liked me. Yeah, because I did nothing wrong. But we can see what they're doing, how they're segregating the classes, right? But it's a matter of entitlement. What is another word for an entitlement?
To be one of them. You're entitled.
A title, right? You're given a title. It's all about pride, right? 100% about pride. And if their ego is touched, right? So they can't have somebody like this in part of their group because, well, not to mention they were always very jealous and envious of the fact that of somebody else's power, right? And their fear of losing their own power, right? They were never helping somebody grow. They were always hiding to keep them underneath them, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're probably very jealous. They're afraid that Jesus was going to take over their positions and they were going to be thrown out.
Right. Yeah. And their thought, they were so big in their head that if God was going to do something, they were going to do it through them. Right. Because they are the followers. Why would they do it to this guy that's begging? So it's got to be some type of demonic thing, because God would never pick them over, right? Their whole ideology of what God was and who he was and what value he placed on every single person, it was completely skewed, right? Their value is based on this idea of titles and where they were within the church. All right, verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? All right. So Jesus heard that they had cast out the blind man, right? And when Jesus had found him, okay? So Jesus went and found him. It's important, right? It's important to understand that when you make those stances for God, he's going to find you. He's going to come. Trust me on that. When you start doing things in the manner that you start removing things in your life that is distracting you from God, as a whole floodgate gets opened, right? And that's and this is kind of shows how how God works in that manner, right? He answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, you You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. Then he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. And he worshiped him. And Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, but that those who do not see me, those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind.
Might be.
What's that?
I got it. I'm reading it.
Spiritually blind.
That's kind of tongue tying.
So basically, for those who, if you think you see everything,
Mhm.
you're going to find out that you see nothing,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And that when you're not able to see, and you trust in God to show you the way, He's going to show you the way. He's going to show you the light at the end of the tunnel. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, are we blind also? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. Can we ourselves can we say that we see? This is what he's trying to say. It's not in our power. If we don't, God is the one that makes us aware of things, right? And when he used the word see, I think it's better if we use the word aware, right? Made aware, make aware, right? Because that's really what it is. Obviously, the physicality of him healing his blindness was a parable unto itself, right? But he's speaking about seeing from a spiritual sense and being able to be aware of what is happening, right? Being made aware as we're reading this, seeing the mysteries of what he's trying to say, being made aware of what the instruction is and how to take this and apply it to your practical lives, right?
Mhm.
And if you say that, well, I can see on my own accord, he's going to make sure that you don't, right? And it's a interesting fall when that happens. See, that's what happened with me.
Well,
Yeah.
What triggered you? I mean,
What?
you were hurting inside and you just needed to
No,
turn your wicked ways.
no,
No,
no. It was
something had to trigger you and bring you home to the Lord.
there was an event that took place,
Yeah,
but it wasn't.
Yes.
I was hurting or
no,
God was just done.
or you just got sick and tired of the life that was here and you needed to throw it away.
No, ma'am. It wasn't me. It was God. God was done with my shenanigans.
Okay,
I was living a life that there was a God, and
Okay.
it was me.
okay,
So God
Very interesting.
stepped in and made sure that I understood that there was a God and it wasn't me. So when you have that encounter,
right. I know people that need that,
oh yeah,
that they need to be intervened by God.
oh yeah,
Yes,
I had a
Absolutely.
full-blown intervention. God was like, I have enough.
right. That's
Yeah.
wonderful though.
No,
It's like me smoking. I mean, 35 years, I couldn't put them down.
no,
You know,
Mhm.
I would borrow money from people if I didn't have it.
Yeah.
So I could have cigarettes. And now you look back and go, that was about ignorant, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Destroying your insides.
sometimes you have events that take place where you feel like there's an intervention
Yes,
that God intervenes by having something take place, right?
right,
When you can't
right.
control yourself, like when you don't have the ability of self-control.
Right. Well, Corey,
God
I
will
got
help you
really
out.
sick.
Mm-hmm.
I got the pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I tried to smoke, I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it
You
was
tried
like,
though.
I tried. It was like, throw it. That's it. So I never went back. I asked the Lord at that moment,
Mhm.
please help me not to do this.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. And I never picked another one up. And that was 15 years ago. So
Something happened
I
to
couldn't have
me.
done it without him, though, like he said, without the
Yeah.
Lord being there saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here.
I tried to stop smoking for
I
about a
did too.
year.
I even put things in my ears, you know, how you can go and that's bull. That just takes your money. You know, that don't do nothing. You still smoke.
Yeah.
You know,
God delivered me in one day.
well, I'm telling you, I thank him. I got on my knees
I
after
was
that.
watching a Christian revival, and he was on my shoulder and said, do you trust me? 3 times. And I said, yes, 3 times. I never
Mhm.
had another desire,
Me
never
either.
had another cigarette.
And y'all could all sit here and
Totally
smoke and blow it
delivered
in my
instantly.
face, and I wouldn't want it.
That was back in 87 or 88.
Mm-mm.
It's
Yep.
sort of like when a smoker stops smoking, how they get fanatical about, oh my God, you got a cigarette. Oh, I can't stand it.
Mm.
I think we're gonna end. We're gonna end there because we're going into a new chapter.
Oh, yeah, we're going into 10.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question again for you.
Yes, ma'am.
What about your Jewish friend? You're still friends?
You still Jewish?
Well, I know, but I mean, does he think he wants to convert, to come over and
I don't think so.
no?
So what's interesting is when we were friends, when we worked together,
Uh-huh.
I was not who I am now.
Oh, okay.
I can assure you I was not the one trying to drive him to I was not in his ear telling him to find Jesus. I was
I
not.
see.
Yeah.
Okay. I got you now.
No.
Okay.
I was no.
Okay.
And what's interesting though is, and you hear Tori talk about it quite a bit, is you have to when you make those changes, when God makes those changes in you,
Right.
you start recognizing that you can't go back, or you shouldn't go back to environments that you were in, right?
Right.
Like for
Right.
example, like you know, smoking. For example,
Right.
if you always smoked while having a beer, right?
Right.
And that, or your morning coffee,
Yes.
right? It would be best that you not have your morning
Have
coffee,
the morning coffee. Well, yeah.
right?
Right.
So in the same regard, if the people that you were surrounded with, sometimes it's best not to go
Right.
back to that place, right? Because the other thing is when you've changed, if they've only known you a certain way, and in this case, if you were a friend of mine, you couldn't have been very good yourself if you actually liked me.
In that other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Certainly.
So it has kept me from, but I think that's how God works also. He doesn't remember, I kind of brought it up at church this last Sunday, right? God tells us to stay away from these people, avoid such people,
Right. Tori says it a bunch.
right? Like the whole, chapter in 2 Timothy is, in 2 Timothy 3 goes through a list of
Cut your ties.
cut your ties. Don't
Doesn't
surround
mean
yourself.
you can't pray for them, though.
No, absolutely not. No, it's not a matter of like, you're not judging them. It's not a
Right.
matter of them. It's a matter of you. Because what
Right.
God is saying is don't be pulled back in, right? It's easy to get pulled back in when you're surrounding yourself with people, right? And because you're not surrounding yourself with people, you're surrounding yourself with the Spirit, right? Think of it that way. If you surround yourself with 5 people who are not walking with God, that's fine. But you probably shouldn't be hanging out with them all the
They will
time.
pull you down.
They're going to pull you down because we are all sinners. It's not
Mhm.
the reason is not because they're, there's judgment. It's what happens when you're surrounding yourself with in that environment. If you're in a bar, you're going to drink.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. That's true.
So
Stay out.
So
It works there.
Mhm.
I'm using
I
that
know,
figuratively as
I
a.
know it works there, but I mean, like say, I'm not gonna tell Jennifer, let's go have a beer after here when we leave. You know?
I don't like beer. Yeah.
She'll probably say.
But, I understand totally, because I had some weird old friends, just like
Yeah.
you said you did.
Yeah.
And, and they're not gonna come over. There's no,
Right.
it don't matter. They can see me like I am.
Yeah.
They're still partying and getting down and smoking, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Not cigarettes,
Uh-huh.
but, but that's their style. That's them. I don't care.
Yeah.
Everybody will hit their knees one day.
That's right.
Everybody will hit their knees. So smoke them up, roll them up.
Yeah.
I don't care.
That's my problem. I do care.
That's what.
Well, I think we can see with what Jesus is doing is we can
Yes.
see that that's why testimonies are so important also, right?
Yes.
If you know somebody before
Yes.
and then you know them after,
I
And you
think
can
they're different.
yeah, it's hard to imagine somebody a different way than what we meet them
That's
as.
what I'm
right?
saying. I've always tried to get my son to get up because I know Pastor would let him
Huh?
and give his testimony.
Yeah.
And he won't do it. But y'all just don't know where he came from.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's came a long way. So,
So
yes.
if you give a testimony, but you don't see the results,
Uh,
but you know that God's working on it,
Mhm.
like when I Uber,
Yeah.
I give testimonies
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time. And I know that they hear them and it stirs them.
Yeah, you don't know when they're going to actually resonate with what you're telling them. It could be then, it could be because it's not, it's not your words, it's God's words, right?
Mhm.
All right, let's finish up. I'm going to turn off the live feed. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Corey.
So
It
we're
was very
starting-
interesting.
So we're starting with the